Just to clarify, though, there's been some confusion about that, but I believe that it's just this high score file that will be locked in that save game. I think you will be able to play it again.
You can play it again from that save file.
Yeah, but
you can't play it again over from the start unless I've.
Yeah, there's been confusion about it. I reached out to Capcom this week, and I heard back nothing.
Okay. Well, eventually they'll get back to us.
Yes, but it's weird, though. Capcom's also had some DRM issues. For instance, with one of the titles that's coming out this week, Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition for the PC. Originally, they were going to have this crippling DRM on the PC that wouldn't allow you to really play the game except in almost a glorified demo mode unless you were playing it online. And due to gamer outcry and outrage, they actually removed that feature. So now it's less crippled DRM on it. But, what's weird about these DRM issues is they seem to be affecting PC and console just in different ways.
DRM, that's a constant return on control issues.
Now, I do want to point out
which we're transitioning into now. Hey, it's time for control issues. You got a point, Brian?
Yeah, about control issues, because we're not talking about the stuff we just talked about before. Actually, I did just want to point out that on the World of Warcraft free-to-play, it's not really free-to-play. If you look at it, it's really just a rejiggering of their same 30-day trial, except instead of being time-limited,
it's level limited. Which actually makes it shorter.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you play really slow.
Unless you're an altaholic
unless you
like
twink.
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the game is free.
Could you twink at 19?
Well.
And then just never pay? I know people.
I'm happy.
I know people who do that.
Yeah, no, I think you're an adult at age 19. And
of course, you can never create any other character.
Well, I'm sorry, you're talking about something totally different.
Yeah.
This is confusing.
That's where you get up to a certain level's max and you don't go over it, so that you can play all the content at that level forever.
Oh, gotcha.
So you essentially try to lock down your character so it never earns any more XP.
So in other words, it's the Peter Pan syndrome, but on World of Warcraft.
Right.
Yeah.
Similar,
I'll never
but
get
different.
older.
Now, but with that, though, they're giving away the game for free, though, now. You don't actually have to buy the retail copy to do the free-to-play.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, who actually...
Which you could do. You could download
They had a
free
friend
trial.
code before, and, I mean, basically, they're drug pushers.
Also...
Well, yeah, I've always maintained that Blizzard should be like, just airdropping World of Warcraft CDs over large areas
like
of the country.
Oh my gosh! Don't make them into AOL Part 2.
Because all you want is to get people sucked into playing the game and paying that $14.99 a month. That's where
first hit's free.
Yeah. Well, our first control issue was apparently Blizzard. Our second one was Supreme Court striking down the violent video game ban here in California. So the brief on this, there was an attempt to pass a law that said if you were under the age of 18, you would have to have parental consent to purchase certain video games that were deemed violent.
Phrase it correctly. It's not, the law didn't say that you had to have parental consent to buy. They said it was illegal.
It was illegal for a retailer to sell to a minor without parental
An M-rated game.
Yeah.
Well, and also keep in mind, they didn't even tie it. They didn't tie it to
the law didn't specify M-rated.
Or was violent.
It had a vague definition of violence, which was one of the problems the Supreme Court had. Said, look, this definition of violence is too wide.
Yeah.
And what the majority of the court said was, you are limiting speech based on a very vague definition, and you can't limit that in this case. We're not saying you can't limit what gets sold to kids, but this is just, this is a free speech issue, and you're limiting speech without showing a clear cause for it. Now, a couple of Justice Clarence Thomas actually spoke for the first time in 50 cases,
which was a huge deal.
I was about to say he never gives comments, and in fact, I didn't want to say anything because I was on the PC Gamer podcast when they broke the story and they said it was Clarence Thomas. I didn't want to talk out, but I thought it probably wasn't Clarence Thomas. He never talks,
but
he did on this one. And he was on the dissenting opinion. He actually felt like this.
He and
was
Breyer were the two dissenters. They both wrote their own dissents, but they wrote them from slightly different perspectives. They essentially agreed, though, that because it's children, you should be able to regulate this.
Well, and I'm not against all kinds of regulation. However, certainly something that's so poorly worded as this is the good bad idea. And of course, it's so cheap. It's a way to score cheap political points to dog on violent video games. Because when you say violent video games, everyone thinks of your Manhunt 2s or any of these hideous things. They're like, well, that's not for me. But I'm going to say it's so important that these be protected and that these games exist. These games have to exist. There has to be something on the market that's more hideous than any of us want to actually buy. And that's the nature of freedom.
But should it be sold to children? I mean,
Well,
this wasn't
okay,
about
hold on.
whether they're allowed to be sold or
is
not.
for. That's what the Entertainment Software Ratings Board is for, and that's what I find interesting about this. The ESRB was actually formed in response to lawmaker outcry back in the mid-'90s over games like Mortal Kombat and Night Trap.
Right.
I remember I spoke at a symposium that a California legislator had in the mid-'90s about this pre-ESRB, where they were going on and on about, these are the type of games you would have seen in Nazi Germany, all sorts of fear-mongering about what this will do to, the effect of violence on children that were playing these games. So the publishers came together and formed the ESRB specifically to say we can self-regulate, having our own entity to give conclusive ratings information on these games to help parents make informed decisions about what their children should be playing, which is why I thought the California law, my disagreement with it was that doesn't this go a step further to have a government regulation?
Oh, when so.
It's already self-regulated, and I don't think anyone's really had any complaints about the ESRB and the job that they've done rating games. People know that an M-rated game is an M-rated game.
That's the whole meaning, the whole reason that the MPAA was created. Now, the MPAA is arbitrary and it's unfair, and the way they run their business is not the way I'd like the business to be run. But for 50 years now, they've kept the government out of the business of saying what movies could and could not
And the
come
Catholic
out.
Church.
Well, yeah.
Which was the de facto rating system before the MPAA started doing it.
I didn't know that.
Everyone
Nor did
looked
I.
at the Catholic Church's ratings to decide whether their kids should see movies.
But there's a lot
Insert
of
your own jokes here.
but there's a lot of precedent for effective self-regulation, even though it's counterintuitive. But the MPAA has pulled it off. The Comics Code Authority has pulled it off for comic books, and I think the ESRB is doing it. And I, for one, this is a one for the good guys. It's one for common sense that they said that this poorly worded government regulation to essentially, who's to say what violent is,
No, but here's something, because we seem to all be sort of agreeing here. So let me throw a wrench into the works. The Supreme Court said that we're not saying you can't restrict violent video games from being sold to children. What we're saying is your law was written very poorly and in such a way that you were, first of all, restricting it to video games. You were saying you weren't, you can sell a DVD that has more violent content to a minor, but you can't sell a video game. That's too broad. That makes no sense. So they're essentially challenging people to go back and rewrite the laws to say we're going to make it illegal to sell anything that is rated M to minors. If they did that, it might pass the Supreme Court's test here.
Although most stores do enforce that law. Or do enforce that rating
Policy.
rule.
That
Policy. Yeah, it's not a law, but it's a policy where they don't sell M-rated games to children. What I thought was interesting, though, going a step beyond your interpretation of it, Tom, is that Anton Scalia, in his opinion, actually said that children are introduced to violence. That's been the way since the days of fairy tales, and then actually cited Grimm fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, things like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as children being just accustomed to having violence in their entertainment media that they were, back then being read to or consuming in some form or another, and essentially saying that this is nothing new, kids can handle some violence, which is kind of a weird, I agree with the decision, but it's kind of weird when you get into that subtext of it. I don't know, for me though, Scalia, and I said this as someone who doesn't often agree with Anton Scalia, he is one of my favorite Supreme Court justices just because he will have these crazy explanations of things where that is a guy that, agree with him or not, he is not afraid of whether or not you take issue with what he has to say.
He has his own logic. That's
I want to play a video game that's Supreme Court Justice Smackdown, and you actually you can play as Scalia and body slam Clarence Thomas.
It's like Mortal Justice.
Mortal Justice, but the J spelled with a G.
Ready, judge. Our other control issue for today, a streaming bill could affect video games as well. What's this about?
So this bill has been around for a while. It's Senate Bill S-978, which essentially states that 10 or more public performances by electronic means of streaming copyrighted content will get you no more than 5 years imprisonment. There's some weird specifications that they have here. I'm looking at, they're saying that essentially it's like a 10 strikes and you're out policy over the course of a year of streaming copyrighted works.
Yeah, they're trying to make the public performance law work for streaming, is what it sounds like.
Well, actually, I think they're trying to make it work against that in the sense of fair use.
Work for the regulation of streaming.
Yeah.
In other words, saying if you stream something online and more than a certain amount of people see it, then that makes it a public performance, and we're going to come down on you as if you did a public performance of anything without a license.
At what point do we get to the point where we can just say enough is enough, and this is idiotic, and dang it, we live in a digital age, and I don't physically go over to my friend's house and play video games together, but you know what I do? I actually fire up Justin.tv and get like 20 friends to watch me play Portal 2 with my brother. How can you make that a crime?
May of 2031.
Well, this isn't how it started, though. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but this bill has actually been around for a couple months. It started specifically to deal with people that were streaming sports pay-per-views, streaming events, and then the MPAA and all sorts of rights organizations backed up in favor of it and lobbied for it.
They said, look, if we can shut down the soccer game, we can shut down the
people
folks
that are streaming
who are putting
movies,
up movies.
people that are streaming, basically
game.
looking at the fact that streaming is more of an effect to their business model than perhaps even piracy is, because there's sort of this gray area now that on YouTube we can go on and find old episodes of TV shows, we can find movies, we can find weird recordings that people are doing off the television on their flip cam or their phone to essentially stream. And it seems like YouTube now, they'll take it down if someone files a Digital Millennium copyright request and a DMCA takedown notice. However, unless they do that, it stays up there.
Well, we're backing into this, right? We're talking about movies, we're talking about sports, and everybody out there is probably familiar with that stuff, but this is going to somehow possibly apply to streaming video games.
Because of the way the law is written.
Like what you did with Portal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a fantastic experience. And if anything, like, you have no idea how many tweets I've gotten of people saying, watching you and your brother play was about the funniest thing I've ever seen. Portal 2 looks amazing. I wasn't going to buy it, but now I'm going to buy it. This in no way serves the copyright owners. But here's the other thing, and you being probably the sportsiest of the three of us, wasn't there an initiative saying that you couldn't even accurately report what happened during a baseball game? You could not say the factual number of RBIs, the number of home runs, the number of balls and strikes and whatnot.
Well, I don't know why you would say that I'm the sportsiest of us, Brian, but yes, there was an online law about whether the stats were actually the property of the league or not, and whether it was okay for you to stream those out on like Twitter or something.
So specifically, here's the problem: is we have different. And first of all, I think this is a bad law. This is an obviously hilariously bad law when it comes to video games. It is still a bad law when it comes to doing live streams when you're playing stuff in the background, and it's unfairly a bad idea when it comes to an organization like Twit, where we're a news organization. We give commentary, we talk about the latest things that are happening, and in the course of doing so, we talk about what people are talking about, which is the latest movie trailers, the latest video game trailers, and all these things. Somehow turning that into a felony, this is the limits of absurdity that I'm willing to take, and it's time for everyone to say
fair use is a defense. So you could make the argument that even if this law was used against us, we could go to court and we could defend ourselves and say we're a news gathering organization and we should follow to this law. That's up for debate. What I find more interesting is this idea of, if I'm playing a video game, I'm creating what's happening.
You're creating content.
I'm
You're
not
in
just
control.
taking somebody's movie and slapping it up online. I'm moving a character around. Now, I'm definitely using their intellectual property to do it. I couldn't do it any other way. But it's not as straightforward to me as just taking someone else's work and copying it. It requires me to participate. So shouldn't that change how it's interpreted?
That would be the exact logic behind remixes, is saying, no, I own this because, I took I Want You Back and mixed it with Wonderwall, and so this is my song because I took these two things and I put my own spin on it.
I think there should be mechanical royalties for that kind of stuff, and maybe there should be mechanical royalties for video games. Because right now, if I want to sing someone else's song, I do not have to get their permission. All I have to do is pay a mechanical royalty.
To the Harry Fox organization.
It's set down in statute.
No, that's actually what it's called.
Is that what it is?
That's
Is it really?
The Harry Fox organization, I believe.
I'm thinking of ASCAP BMI.
Well, that's ASCAP BMI, which collects publishing royalties, but essentially, if you don't make a deal with a specific publisher, I believe it's called the Harry Fox organization, you used to be like 6.98 cents. You can make it a check to them.
People?
They're basically a collection, like an umbrella agency that handles collections and licenses for songs.
But I think that should be you should be able to do that for remix, where it's like, if you're using more than a fair use amount in a remix, but you are creating something new.
Where does where does this end? I mean, does it end when my daughter grabs her Mickey Mouse doll and acts out something on YouTube? She provides the voice. She does the, she
and that's
walks
where we
along.
need fair use.
You're like,
laws.
oh, well,
that's where we need sensible fair use that actually protects consumers and doesn't require them to go to court and defend themselves every time.
Well,
because
that's what my
playing
problem,
with the dolls on the video.
You said let's just settle it in court, and it's like the very act of being sued.
I'm
is
saying
a
that's the
punishment.
way it is now.
Yes, yeah, which is terrible.
Yeah.
And I think the key with this is that I don't think it's intended to stop all of this behavior in a blanket fashion. I think the way it's written, it could be interpreted that way. But really what they're going after here are people that are specifically streaming copyright works that they want to have a leg to stand on enforcement-wise. Because right now, unless you're running one of those organizations where you charge money to stream sporting events, you essentially charge cut rates.
Right.
They've shut down a lot of those organizations. What they're trying, I believe, to do is cut down the gray area of people that are just putting stuff on YouTube that the copyright holder might have a disagreement with having it spread. They essentially want to put some fear out there and have a leg to stand on if there's a serial offender to where they can press charges and have it be against the law.
I don't like where this heads because first
I
of all,
don't either.
And specifically, like you have an organization like Blizzard that is actively trying to create StarCraft as a spectator sport. They want this kind of shoutcasting of all the games.
Yeah.
You have a brand new class of entertainer as the sports announcers for video games. This is shutting that down. And likewise, everybody who's developed all of a sudden becomes dangerous.
This doesn't shut it down. If Blizzard says in their license you're allowed to do this, this just says if you're not licensed to do it, then they have the right to shut you down.
I think
so. Blizzard's free to say, "Oh, we're gonna give you an exception in the terms for this video game."
I don't like the way we're all scared all the time of accidentally singing. I was watching the Venture Brothers the other day, and there's one moment
sing it
when Henchman 24 is singing the what was it, the Human League? I forget what that.
Don't
80s
you
band.
want me?
Yeah, but he sings it like obviously, hilariously, unquestionably bad. So much so that you could tell they wrote that line that way so that they couldn't possibly be accused of singing even one line of the song with that tune. And it's like, this is asinine. It's absolutely idiotic, and it does not serve the interests of anybody.
No, and I think that it's going to come down to the enforcement. I'm curious if they can actually implement this law and have it stand with any sort of court challenge. I think if this passes, which I think it will, and I think this is the reason people are freaked out. I mean, look, when I'm not playing video games and spending time here on the Twit network, I'm an avid follower of politics. I follow politics the way most people follow sports.
Right.
And with everything that the Congress and the Senate has on their plates right now, unfortunately, this is one thing that they seem that they can agree upon because there's so much backing of entertainment rights organizations.
So much money behind it. I mean, don't say backing. There's no public support for this. There's zero
politics,
public
backing
support for
is
this.
money, Brian.
In
politics, money, them's the votes that matter.
There's no public support for this. This does not serve the interests of their constituents. It serves the interests of the people lining their pockets with money. It's corrupt, and it's a bad idea. It's a step in the wrong direction.
Here's the thing you can do. If you want to protest this, the Protect IP Act and this anti-streaming bill, there's a site that's been set up, demandprogress.org. I'm putting the link out on my Twitter. Oh, good. You found it. I
was looking for it right there. Yes,
So please. I just tweeted the link out. I'm at Glenn Rubenstein on Twitter. There's a link there. You can check out ways that you can protest this bill and let your congressperson or your senator know that you think this is a step too far. Because I'm just telling you, my political handicapping of someone who watches C-SPAN and all the major cable networks, I think this is going to pass just because it's Washington likes something they can all get behind and agree upon. And as we know from, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, much legislation has passed where the people voting on it haven't even necessarily read all of the legislation.
Well, especially in the early days when we're in the Wild West of a new, it's a new turf here on the internet. And of course, it's easy to pass things that sound good on a piece of paper, and you're getting, $100,000 donation from these people. So sure, why not? I think it's reasonable for people not to take other people's video games and stream them for free on the internet.
I'm just going to put this out there as one glimmer of hope, perhaps, and this is just a little political speculation.
A glimmer of hope?
Glimmer of hope, that's good. Which is, now if they don't pass this by a veto-proof majority, I would maybe have some fingers crossed that President Obama, because of his ties with Google and influence. No, because think about
what about President Obama so far has indicated
what about Vice President
Biden,
who has said, I will do everything the industry wants?
No, but
no problem.